Speakers will have 3 minutes to speak or 6 minutes if representing a group. When called, speakers should approach the microphone, provide their name and address for the record. If you are participating via Zoom, please make sure you're ready when called upon. The board may ask questions of the speaker. After all speakers have been heard, public comment will then be closed. The applicant will be given a chance for rebuttal after audience comments. Any items shown, such as videos, presentations, pictures, or maps, must be left with the clerk for the public record. Items shown from electronic devices should be emailed to the clerk. A motion will be made and seconded. Board discussion may occur and conclude with a vote. I will request a roll call vote for any split votes. The first item on the agenda tonight is proof of publication. Do I have a motion?
I make a motion.
Okay.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, and the motion passes. We'll move on to the minutes. Do I have a motion for approval of the minutes or any changes?
Motion to approve. Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, and that passes. The next item is a technical review item, Sylvan
Madam Chair,
Estate.
Paul Chipok, Deputy County Attorney. For the record, I'd just like to establish that while a quorum is physically present of the board, and that would allow the one member that is participating remotely to participate, but we do have the quorum established physically here and consistent with state law.
So do we need to, when we do a vote, do we need to wait and hear, we need to hear from Dan? Audibly, I mean? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, we'll wait for that. The technical review item is the Sylvan Estates preliminary subdivision plan, and this will be presented by Mary Moskowitz.
Good evening. For the record, Mary Moskowitz, Planning and Development Services. This request is for the approval of the Sylvan Estates preliminary subdivision plan containing 12 lots on 4.8 acres zoned PD plan development located on the south side of Sylvan Lake Drive, approximately 1/2 mile west of Orange Boulevard. The PSP proposes 12 family residential units with a maximum density of 2.5 dwelling units per net buildable acre and a minimum lot size of 9,000 square feet. The PSP complies with the conditions of the Sylvan Lake Estates Master PD Development Plan, Development Order, in Chapter 35 of the Seminole County Land Development Code. All internal roads will be private and the utilities will be provided by Seminole County. Staff recommends approval of the preliminary subdivision plan for Sylvan Estates subdivision.
Okay. Is the applicant present? Would you like to make a presentation? Okay. All right. Questions from the board? Questions of staff? No? Would any member of the audience wish to speak in favor or opposition? I don't need to do that anyways. It's not public hearing, right? In that case, we'll move for a vote or board discussion. Questions, comments? Discussion. Mary, I am aware that there are quite a number of large trees on this property. Has the applicant made any indication of what will happen with those trees, if those will be retained or any effort will be made?
Yes, so there are, the buffers are wider than what is required in the conventional zoning district, and one of the reasons for that was for the preservation of trees. They will be required to submit that tree preservation plan as part of their final engineering plans to see if those, make sure those trees are saved.
Okay, fantastic.
Now, would they be saved? They can't be saved if they're in the right-of-way or in a building lot.
Correct. So the idea, and you can see, it's a little, it shows better in your plans, but you'll see that there are trees along the perimeter that are being saved, and then trees in the back near the retention area that would also remain as well.
I'd like to make a motion to approve.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the motion carries. We'll move on to the next item, which is a public hearing item. Beardall Avenue, PD, Major Amendment Rezone, also presented by Mary Moskowitz.
I'm not used to coming back-to-back here, so. Good evening. For the record, Mary Moskowitz, Planning and Development Services. This request is for a rezone from PD to PD on 5.94 acres for an office and warehouse uses located on the west side of Beardall Ave, approximately 500 feet south of Moore Station Road. On November 18th, 2008, the Board of County Commissioners approved the Beardall Avenue PD consisting of uses permitted under the M1A Very Light Industrial Zoning District, including outdoor storage. The developer did not submit for a final development plan or engineered site plan. Therefore, the PD entitlements have since expired. The applicant proposes to develop the subject property as an office with a contractor's equipment and storage yard as an ancillary use. The master development plan proposes a 3,500 square foot office building and an 8,000 square foot maintenance building. The office building will be located in the front of the subject site adjacent to Beardall Avenue, and the maintenance building will be located in the area designated as lay-down yard, where the contractor's equipment will be stored and maintained. Outdoor storage will be screened from view with a 6-foot-high wall and landscaping. The site is identified as being part of the sub-area 4 under the Seminole County, City of Sanford, JPA, which promotes uses that are compatible with airport noise, such as industrial parks, commercial developments, and office complexes. The City of Sanford has reviewed the proposed development and has determined that it is consistent with the JPA. Staff finds the request to be consistent with the comprehensive plan and compatible with the trend of development in the area. The area has been transitioning from agricultural and residential uses to more intense industrial uses, which are more compatible and consistent with the existing future land use designation on the property. The site is adjacent to the Orlando Sanford International Airport on the west, the City of Sanford Airport Industrial Land on the north, and HIP AP future land use to the south and east. Therefore, staff recommends the Board of County Commissioners adopt the proposed ordinance enacting a rezone from PD Plan Development to PD Plan Development and approve the associated development order and master plan for 5.94 acres located on the west side of Beardall Avenue, approximately 500 feet north of Moore Station Road. That concludes my report. I do not think the applicant is present. Is there a Mr. Potts on the Zoom? Okay, so he's not on Zoom either.
We have questions of staff?
Yeah, Mary, so when we adopt this, is the city of Sanford going to annex this?
So it is within the JPA, but it's not within, there are no utilities there.
Okay.
So it's not, let me see, we'll go. So it's not, if they don't get utilities, they probably won't annex. If they usually, what we do is what we call a pre-annexation agreement if they are obtaining utilities, and then at the time that they become eligible for annexation, then they would annex into the city. So this site has indicated that they will be using a septic and well because there are no utilities at this time.
All right, and being on the airport, our future land use really coincides with what this property is being used for.
Yes.
Yeah, all the way around the airport. Yeah, okay.
Okay, any other questions of staff? Okay. Would any member in the audience like to speak in favor or opposition to this request? Tammy, do we have any comment cards? No. Do we have anyone on Zoom? Okay, in that case, we'll close public comment. Any further questions, discussion, or a motion?
I'll make a motion to recommend the Board of County Commissioners adopt the proposed ordinance enacting a rezone from PD Plan Development to PD Plan Development and approve the associated development order and master plan for 5.94 acres located on the west side of Beardall Avenue, approximately 500 feet north of Moore Station Road.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, seeing none, the motion passes. That will close the public hearing. We'll move on to closing business. Mary, do you have anything for the board?
Not at this time, no.
That's back to back to back.
The back to back to back to back.
All right, in that case, the meeting is adjourned. and we will move to our work session.
Yeah.
Hey, good evening. For the record, Mary Moskowitz, Planning and Development Service. The purpose of tonight's work session is to update the Planning and Zoning Commission on the progress of the Land Development Code revision and to provide an opportunity to discuss the individual topics. I will begin tonight with a brief history of the Land Development Code, then provide the Commission an update on the project. We will move into an overview and discussion of the topics that are currently under review. We will end this evening with the opportunity for open discussion and for the Commission to provide any additional input on items. However, please feel free to stop me anytime during the presentation if you have any questions or comments that you would like to add. The purpose of the Land Development Code is to establish standards, procedures, and minimum requirements to regulate land development in areas in unincorporated Seminole County and to coordinate and integrate development review process of the Seminole County Comprehensive Plan. The code is divided into chapters of administration, procedures, and regulations related to development. The chapters that this body is probably most familiar with are Chapter 30, which is the zoning regulations, and Chapter 35, the subdivision regulations. The Seminole County Code was first adopted in 1960, with major updates occurring in 1973 and 1980. The most recent edition was published in 2004, and since then we've had 13 supplements in Muni Code with ordinances that would update certain regulations. In February 2020, staff contracted with Canaan and Associates to draft materials for a major revision to the Land Development Code. The process began with a thorough review of current regulations. This work included work sessions with the Board of County Commissioners and meetings held with our stakeholder groups. Phase 1 of the project concluded with a white paper that identified the issues and the consultant's recommendation for approach to this project. Following the white paper, we moved to Phase 2 of the project, which included the consultant's recommendations for strategies on rewriting the Land Development Code. We decided to focus most of our efforts on Chapter 30 zoning, although there are some other chapters like Chapter 60, the arbor regulations, which are also being addressed. We are now in Phase 3 of the project, where the consultant staff have begun the actual code revisions. This includes seeking input from the Board of County Commissioners and other stakeholders, such as the Planning and Zoning Commission. One of the duties of the Planning and Zoning Commission, acting as your capacity of the land planning agency, is to review the proposed land development regulations and amendments and make recommendations to the Board of County Commissioners as to the consistency of the proposals with the Seminole County Land Development Code. As we move into Phase 4 of the project, the final approval, like with any other land development revisions, these revisions will come back to this board for recommendation to the BCC. And so before I move on to the next, I'm going to pause here to see if you have any questions about the process. Okay, seeing none, we'll go on. So this topic list was included in your agenda package, and it shows a list of topics that are being addressed during this rewrite. We've currently already held one work session with the BCC to review the arbor ordinance, buffer landscape, and open space, and we had a brief discussion on self-storage. On September 14th, we will be holding a work session to discuss assembly use standards, the R&P development, Florida-friendly landscaping, and RV parking. I mean, you might see it's a little hard to read on here, but the missing middle standards were scheduled for that meeting. We've pushed that meeting, and instead we will be discussing the I-4 overlay signage, which was scheduled for October. For tonight's discussion, we've included in your package the draft recommendations for the mixed-use development, the residential neighborhood development, the missing middle housing, parking standards, and our rural non-residential design standards. So this next section, I'm going to go through the slides pretty quickly, so if you have any questions, just raise your hand, stop me, and I'll pause for that. Okay, so the first section is the mixed use and infill. So currently, the comprehensive plan permits mixed use developments in several categories categories, including the MXD future land use. However, there is no zoning district that explicitly permits or encourages mixed-use development. The comp plan policies that support the Central Florida Regional Growth Vision, How Shall We Grow, discourages sprawl and encourages a compact, walkable, and mixed-use development. This slide here that you see, those areas kind of in the pinkish red, those are areas where potential mixed-use developments could occur based on existing future land use. And these are just some kind of examples of what mixed-use development would look like. And some examples, so a lot of times when people think mixed-use development, they think of a vertical mixed use, which is, kind of that commercial on the bottom and apartments up top. But you can also do a horizontal mixed use as well. It doesn't have to be all stacked 3-story buildings. So the goal of the mixed-use corridor is to promote the infill and redevelopment. We know that the projects would vary in size. And then also, not every project needs to be mixed use to be in a mixed-use corridor, but we do want to try to discourage the single-use developments of less than 15 acres, which is still a pretty large single-use development. Every project must increase connectivity for both biking, walking, and driving. So we're trying to, reestablish the grid and have those internal access points. And the regulations should be flexible to evolve over time. You'll see a lot with mixed-use projects that they may have, you have to have this use right now, and the market may not be ready for that type of use. So we want to try to make sure that we build for the future, but we're also building for now as well. So the standards, again, that are in your packet that we would be addressing with the mixed-use standards are those permitted densities and intensities, the active ground floors, building height. We talk about frontage types, which are the active, which, you think of your storefront, the windows, those types of things. And then your more passive, which are the ones, with the residential uses that people may walk through. And then obviously the service ones, that's your back alley where your garbage and your service trucks go. The placement, are we going to have building frontage, setbacks, build to lines, site design, circulation, civic design, and building standards. So all of those standards are in your packet, so I would encourage you to review those and then to provide us any comments that you may have. So again, I'll pause here for one quick second to see if we have any comments on mixed use. Dan has his hand up.
Hi, regarding the mixed use, you mentioned that often you focus on walking, driving, and bicycling, walking, bicycling, and driving. Any thought ever go into any concern in regards to public transportation? Is that considered, or is that something that kind of falls outside of the realm?
No, that's a great question. Yes, so there are standards that we are looking at for that with the public transportation, particularly with what we call our super stops, our transfer points. An example of that would be the Oxford overlay, which has the Fern Park super stop at that. So how would you integrate that design into your development? Those standards are things that would be integral to the part of a mixed-use standard, but by creating a walkable and bikeable, and I'm going to even go a little trendy here and say micro-transit environment, that those would promote that mass transit use. And another area, which you didn't ask about, but I will discuss too, is the idea of providing for the Ubers and Lyfts, so having a space for those, and also your package drop-offs and things like that. So all those things need to be incorporated into your standards. So.
Okay, and so then I'm assuming along with that is, with the public transportation specifically, is how much time in between each stop, in other words, like the waiting period?
So, yeah, so that's called headway when you're talking about a mass transit. And so the amount of headway in our transit service is decided by our transit provider, which is Lynx. We work very closely with them, but the amount of service that they provide is based on the amount of funding that we give them. So we just need to make sure we're balancing that so that we're providing them enough funding to be able to provide the service that would support that type of use.
Dan, you're just a little tiny square here, so I can't really see you. If you have a question, just jump in next time.
Will do. All right, thank you.
I have a question.
No, go ahead.
Would this incorporate or encourage scooter, bike rentals? Is that your micro?
That's micro transit,
Okay.
and so, yeah, that is something that, again, whenever you're increasing walkability or connectivity, you would also allow for other modes of transportation. So one of the things that Seminole County hasn't had to address as much as like a city like Orlando is those microtransit, the scooters, the e-bikes, and then where they should go, where they should be parked. So, but those are all things that we should be thinking about, absolutely.
Yeah, because I've seen that they've been introduced and municipalities without really thinking, should the electric scooters be on the bike path, should it be on the sidewalks, and then people get upset with them being on the sidewalks.
Yes, it is, and if you indulge me for 1 second, I'm going to put my transportation planner hat on, but the speed of those vehicles as a pedestrian or even a casual cyclist, I'm used to going a certain moderate speed or slow speed. Those types of vehicles have the capacity to go 25, some of them may even 30 miles per hour, which is just not conducive for a safe pedestrian environment. So you really need to find that balance between the mobility provided by microtransit and the safety of your pedestrians and slower transit people like myself.
Mary, are you going to try to concentrate on the Sunrail corridor for a lot of this type of development?
Yes, so this again is the example, and so the main corridor in Seminole County is actually the 1792 corridor. You can see the Sunrail stations are highlighted, but really we are limited to the Sanford station and the Altamont Springs station. The other two stations, most of that jurisdiction is within whatever city that they are in, so that those would have those supportive development standards.
Locally? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So any other questions before I move on? I want to make sure. Okay. So the next item is the residential neighborhood pattern. Certain properties are entitled to residential uses based on their existing future land use and zoning designations. Parties to seek these properties find a disconnect between the allowable future land use and the standards in the zoning district and the demands of the residential market. As a result, developers often use the PD, plan development process, to attain higher densities and smaller lots, typically 50 feet in width. The solution is to motivate and incentivize builders and developers to produce better neighborhoods, and this will create a win-win for all parties. The proposed RNP designation would allow developers to achieve these smaller lots by right within the LDR future land use designation, provided that they meet specific design standards. These standards are simpler and more predictable to understand. So the benefits for the county would be more and better open space, canopy trees with rooms to grow and long-term maintenance, predictability compared to the PDs where you always don't know what they're going to have, save the staff and board time, and then again talking about the connectivity with the streets and sidewalks. So this chart here just kind of shows a comparison between what is allowed or what is required in our conventional zoning districts and then what is being proposed in the RNP zoning or overlay districts. So for example, street trees right now currently not required, would be required in the RNP. Open space, residential, our straight residential zoning districts are actually exempt from the open space requirements. In our RNP, we would make it usable common open space at a minimum of 8%. The amenitized stormwater It's not a requirement in conventional zonings, but would be required in the RNP. The street connectivity, we only require it for emergency access. The RNP would require it, except in very specific circumstances, like you know, going into a lake, you wouldn't want a road like that. The housing orientation, so one of the things that we would discourage are those, the snout house. So those are those houses where you have the garage up front and then the house kind of behind that. That really kind of, especially on the smaller lots, it just makes the massing so big, it's basically all you see is garage. So this would kind of bring back that traditional neighborhood feel. So that's the end of my discussion on RNP. I can go back and pause here for a second too and see if you have any questions.
I've got street trees. That is a ongoing issue for every subdivision in Seminole County. It's moving curb and gutters, it's moving sidewalks. These subdivisions are spending an absolute fortune on sidewalk replacement, curb and gutter replacement. I mean, you can't stop trees from growing, and the concrete can't resist the tree growth. So I'm not sure that's a really great requirement.
So, so we are requiring a minimum of 8 feet width for the buffer width, and if they do choose that minimum 8 feet, they would have to have that tree protection, the root barrier protection. They can go up to 10 feet as well, but if they go that high, they would not require that root protection.
So that would be between curb and gutter and sidewalk?
In the sidewalk, and then the tree would be there,
Wow,
yes.
okay.
Mr. Turnage, did you have Turnage? No. But certainly, yes, those are definitely things we are considering, and if you have other comments, please, let us know, and we will share those with the board as well.
Thank you.
Anything else on RNP? Okay, so next is the missing middle housing. The missing middle housing provides diverse housing options to address the mismatch between the available U.S. housing stock and the shifting demographics combined with the demand for walkability. The goals and assumptions are that we have we assume that we have an unmet attainable housing need in Seminole County, and we want to provide recommendations, solutions to fulfill that need. We need to identify where this is even feasible, and then encourage opportunities and incentives. So why missing middle? Really, it's just to broaden the housing choices and affordability. And then kind of what is missing middle? First of all, I want to make it clear that missing middle is a market rate product. So this is not subsidized housing. These would be market rate. I'm going to go, these are the typologies. I'll go into a little bit more detail about the typologies, but you can see they range in size from the tiny 450 square feet to the 2,000 square feet per unit. And so this is kind of things that we're still mulling over with the consultant, strategies for permitting the missing middle. Would it be something that is part of a larger conventional residential product, think something like a Baldwin Park or something like that, or would you permit 100% missing middle type projects, a tiny house community? So again, I'm just going to go over these super quick, so just raise your hand if you need me to slow down. So the first one is we're calling high-density single-family housing. So some people, you may think of them as a tiny home or things like that. They kind of come in different names, but basically it's that small lot, a small house on a small lot. This is one of my favorite, cottage courts. So these tend to have that shared front yard, usually one, sometimes two-story, but again, the feature of those is that they have that shared amenity of that shared common space. Duplex, which you're probably familiar with, either the side-by-side unit, or you can also have the stacked unit, which is the one house over the other. That one's not as common here in the South as the side-by-side. townhome, it's probably one we actually see the most of. And again, it's those units that are built either side by side to each other, and they typically try to have either the alley loaded or no garage at all. So the triplex and the fourplex, again, we can either do that triplex, side by side or the stacked. Also with the fourplex, sometimes you hear like the 2/2, so you have 2 units on the bottom and two units on the top. And then the sixplex, again, just what it is, it's 6 dwelling units, usually, again, built on top of each other, stacked, as opposed to the townhomes, which are stacked horizontally. And then a courtyard building, it's kind of like so what makes this different from an apartment is those shared amenities and the shared outside access, as opposed to when you think of a traditional apartment where everything is in an internal corridor, and again, usually much smaller than what you would think of as a traditional apartment setting. And then also the live-work units, and these are, again, mostly in those mixed-use developments, so you would have your working, your commercial on the bottom, and then your living upstairs. And those, are usually multiple stories. I mean, they have to be at least 2 stories, but usually you'll see 3.5 stories with this type of unit. So this is really where, as staff, what we're looking for some input, some thought, is where should those type of typologies go, and what type of land uses. So right now, the only permitted land use in our low-density residential is detached single-family. So even townhomes aren't technically allowed in the low-density residential future land use. So where would these be appropriate? These are the recommendations from the consultant, but this is something that staff is still looking at and trying to see where we want to land on that. So if you guys have any thoughts or opinions, I hope you feel you can share those with us. And this one's really just kind of more for your information here. These are the recommendations from the consultant on the setback requirements. Again, this is something that staff is currently looking at and seeing if this would be suitable for Seminole County. So these are in your packets as well, so if you have any input on that, we'd appreciate that information. So that concludes my discussion on missing middle. So again, I'll pause for any questions or comments. Okay, with that, so this is in your packet here. Sometimes when I make them on my computer, they read a lot better than standing back here. But these are the draft parking standards. Our goal is really to consolidate and modernize our parking schedule. We really want to reduce that underutilized parking and then incentivize strategies to use parking spaces more efficiently. If you've had an opportunity to look at our parking code, it is quite antiquated, and we really do need to modernize it and update it. This swing may be a little too radical in one direction, so I like the idea of having fewer uses and having it consolidated, but I understand that some different uses sometimes have different parking needs, and we may need to expand it a little bit more. So again, this is something that staff is still looking at, but included in your packets for your input and recommendation. Also, the last drafting information we have in your packet is our rural non-residential design standards. So we've had actually 3 community meetings on this with the residents and commercial property owners in the East Rural area, and I will say that we're about 99% of the way there. One of the things that the feedback that we heard at the meetings was that both the commercial property owners along with the residents currently internally lit signage is prohibited in the rural area. And there is some concern from the commercial property owners that type of signage isn't the most visible and may, they may not be able to develop their property if people can't know what's there. And then the residents actually are in agreement saying that in certain circumstances that an internally lit sign can be appropriate in a rural area. And so they've asked us to kind of re-examine that prohibition and to see if we can come up with some language that would be sensitive to the rural area but still allow for that internally lit signage. So that's something that we're looking at right now. Other areas that we've addressed really just kind of so Tuliota has design standards, and if you guys have ever read the Tuliota design standards, I hope you were trying to go to bed afterwards. They are very detailed, and as a professional planner, something that is difficult to enforce fully. So what we tried to do was to create something that would still protect the rural character in the east rural area, but would be something that could actually be enforceable. So we really slimmed down those design standards and just really address what is important in that area. So the buffer regulations, so this is something where we're kind of just making things easier to read and understand. So the buffers are actually in kind of multiple parts of our code right now, so we want to consolidate everything and put it into one part, that they are performance-based buffers, so a lot of times people get confused because they want to know, what are my buffer requirements? But as staff, we can't actually tell you that until you let us know what you're putting in. So we just want to make sure that we're making that clear for developers. The opacity, one of the things is a lot of times we have the requirement for the wall, so maybe you can put in a hedge and then a decorative fence instead of putting in the wall. The requirements for the utilities, this one comes in a lot. You can't have canopy trees over the overhead utility lines, but that requires a major amendment in your plan development, and it's a safety issue. So we would want the ability to do a more administrative, if you do end up with that conflict between the utility lines and the canopy trees, to be able to allow the understory trees instead as an administrative approval, not having to go back and amend your PD. This one, they eliminate the buffer requirements between most single-family subdivisions. So what happens is if you have, subdivision A comes in and they had their 10-foot buffer, and then subdivision B, it's the same, residential subdivision, but now they also have a 10-foot buffer. Now we have this 20 feet of, I like to call no man's land between the two developments, when really, that might be your, kid's best friend living next door, and they just want to go across the street and play. So it's not always appropriate to have that level of buffer between residential subdivisions. And then just, again, updating some of our terms and terminology, 1980s when this thing was written, we need to update some things. The open space, this one is really, again, just kind of taking that stuff. It's hidden. It's like in the supplemental regulations, kind of way back in the back, and actually making it have its own section so it's clearer and easier to understand. And we talked a little bit about the self-storage, but this is something that we're looking at, is allowing the self-storage as a permitted use in the C2 zoning district. Right now, it's not allowed in any of our commercial zoning districts, and the self-storage use itself has changed, and it's not the same self-storage that it was, the warehouse that you had the garage band performing in, or maybe somebody might be living in it. These units are indoor air conditioned. They look like an office building, and so we feel like they are an appropriate use in that C2 zoning district. So that concludes my portion of the presentation, so I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have, or any other discussion that you're looking at.
Going back, and you may have answered this, but you went through quite a bit. You are looking at allowing housing, and what kind of development would that be?
Yeah, so the high-density residential kind of is what we're calling it. The minimum size that we're looking at is 450 square feet.
Okay.
So I'm not 100% sure. That's something we're still exploring is what zoning district would that be appropriate in. So we haven't nailed that down yet.
Now, Mary, if you did adopt something like that, would it be a built structure, not a trailer-type structure like you see on the tiny home shows and
Yes,
all that?
so it would be something that would be required to go through the Florida Building Code. So a lot of those structures, a mobile home does not have to meet the Florida Building Code. We would require that our structures meet the Florida Building Code,
Okay.
would go through those same.
So it would be a built structure? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
I think that's really important when it comes to that, yeah.
I think it's very interesting, but it's going to be controversial, particularly if you did allow the
It
wheeled
is
type.
popular. I mean, it's something that's gaining popularity. I think it would be very limited to where you would want to put it in the county, but I think, you could find some nooks and crannies to fit it in.
I think Oviedo, the city of Oviedo may have some demonstration
Yeah,
projects
yeah.
that they've done. And obviously, it is a trend that's happening in the United States, so there are projects.
But I really think it needs to be a built structure, code-built structure, as opposed to roll it in and roll it out. That's an RV park, yeah.
I've seen it done where you're trying to replace trailers. And it's on slab, and it might be pre-fabricated, but it's still on slab
Yeah.
for coaches. I guess I've seen
Yeah.
it trying to replace trailers
Yeah.
and that sort of.
Yeah, I think it's needed. I mean, I think the average cost of a small apartment is now $1,400-$1,500 a month.
Yeah.
Cost of housing is outrageous.
Yeah, this is really just to allow option. We did the accessory dwelling units, so this is just another tool in our toolbox.
Okay.
And if you do this, you're going to need more storage buildings.
Which we're looking at in the C2 zoning district. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Any other questions from the board?
No,
All right, although this is a work session, the public is invited to make comments, providing we adhere to the 3 minutes per person rule. Is there anyone in the audience or on Zoom that would like to speak?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Hi, Board. Cindy Holler, 1731 Beacon Drive, Sanford. So when I was looking through what this was going to be presented, which Mary did a great job presenting that, everything tonight, the missing middle housing, I kind of like thoughts that I have. So I'm aware, like all of you are, people are moving to Florida, and they want a quality of life. They want a pool sometimes. They like the weather most of the time. They want a bigger piece of property. Keep tight middle and high density in the urban corridor. Don't want State Road 436 all over Seminole County. So don't want to see this middle housing in suburban or rural areas. So where's our population cutoff? I think that's an interesting thing to ponder. Let's not sell our quality of life. Seminole County, we say we're Florida's natural choice. Anyway, thank you.
Okay, do we have anyone on Zoom?
No hands raised.
In that case, were you looking for some further discussion from us, or?
we're going to have time to review this. in
Yes,
more detail.
just so you know the process. So the information that was provided in your packets tonight are all drafts. And we do have, if you look in that first page, that's got the topics. We've got other areas too that we will be providing drafts on. But we felt that it was important to give the board an opportunity early in the process to start looking at some of this language, because what we didn't want to have happen is, 2 weeks before the meeting that you guys were going to be making your recommendation was the first time that you saw any of these things. So what I would encourage you to do is take this information, look it over, scratch it up. You can contact me, Tammy, Jeff Harper, who is at a convention this week, and that's why I'm presenting. It's actually the project manager for this, and so he's consolidating all of those comments and working with the consultant on putting that together, so you can contact him as well. But really, this is just your opportunity to get kind of a first look at what we've been doing. We will continue to be providing you the drafts as we get them, but we just didn't want to bombard you, right before the P&Z meeting that you were going to be making your final recommendation the first time you saw this stuff. So this is not the end of the revisions. We're going to have a whole packet of things that we're updating.
Good. Thank you.
No problem.
Then, Mary, do you have anything else for us tonight?
No, that's it. I can keep talking if you want, but.
No, I can't wait to do the gavel again.
If you want to hear more about micro transit, let me know.
Okay, very good.